everybody. Welcome to another grad interview. I have with me Courtney West, and you're a recent grad. When did you graduate?
November.
Okay.
Yeah.
A couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
And so we get to talk to grads who have been, they've been grads for a couple years, or a couple months. And so I just love that we get to talk to somebody tonight who is a fairly recent grad, and can kind of share with you kind of the most recent experience, I guess, as a grad. And so I'm so excited that you're here tonight. So why don't you tell us, first of all, where are you from? Where do you hail from?
I hail from Houston, Texas.
I love it. And it's okay if you let that accent out. It's okay. Just let it happen. Okay. I love it. So you guys watching, why don't you go ahead? Hey, Amber, why don't you guys put in the comments where you guys are watching from? We have students from all over the world, and we love to see where people are from. But so Courtney, you're from Texas. How long have you lived there?
But I was born here.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love that. That's awesome.
Long time.
A long time. Good. Well, why don't you, so we know you're a grad, but why don't you tell us a little bit about what you were doing before Pretty Focused?
I was actually very close to thinking I needed to do something other than food photography because of how much I was struggling with having consistent work. So,
wow.
Yeah. My degree is in anthropology and archaeology.
I love that so
much. I was an archaeologist for 6 years. It was very, very physically demanding job.
Really?
We were not in exciting places. We were in tiny little towns in Texas and Louisiana, Arkansas.
Doing what?
We worked mostly for oil and gas companies. So we would do surveys where they were going to, build a pipeline or something like that. So it was never great places you wanted to hang out.
Yeah, sure. When you said small town, I'm thinking exotic town on the other side, little bitty village as you're digging for dinosaurs.
No, it was
not so much.
No,
no dinosaurs. Okay.
Yeah. So I did that for 6 years. While I was doing that, I had always loved baking and cooking, but mostly baking. And so while I was doing that, I thought I wasn't busy enough. And I started a small baking business, and I would only sell at our local farmers market. At the time, I was up in East Texas in Longview. And so for a couple of years on the weekends, I would do that and then still have my full-time job. And it was kind of a way to satiate that creative side. And because of that, I started my own blog, and it wasn't necessarily a typical food blog. It was more like it kind of went with my business. And I could post about like a new product. And then it eventually turned into a food blog, which I still have, but I wouldn't call myself a food blogger because it's not like a serious, like, I'm not like optimizing SEO and all of that. Because I'm not good at it, and it's just, so that was kind of how I started bringing the food in, the creative part, and then left archaeology, moved back to Houston, and since then most of my work has been like freelance or contract. So I taught yoga for quite a while. I started seriously photographing maybe 6 years ago. I started working with some local farms.
Which I think is so cool. I think that's so great.
Technically still food photography, but in a much different sense.
Yeah.
I still do that work, luckily, today. Um, I love it. Um,
Yeah.
and I started getting very, I guess, more serious about actual food photography um, probably about 3 years ago. I
Okay.
started taking courses for myself because that's never something I had invested in. And that was a game changer for
Mhm.
someone when you're self taught up to a certain point.
Yeah.
Um, it was really inspiring. And like just looking at my photos from like, I forget, I think the first year I took a course was 2020 or 2021. And just looking at like a picture from the start of that year to the end, like, it
Yeah. I
was
know.
um, and
I we all have those. Yep.
yeah, so I did that and started gaining a little more confidence with what I was doing, and kind of would get like odd jobs here and there, and then I finally got pretty regular freelance work with Southern Living,
Wow.
and
How did that happen?
well, I applied to I forget where the job listing was. Um, it was technically through I didn't know it was going to be for Southern Living. It was through their like the media company
Oh,
they
okay.
that
They
like
work with her.
owns them. I'm not sure the
Yeah.
logistics. Um, and so I didn't know it was going to be for Southern Living because they own like an insane amount of brands. And
Okay.
so went through the interview process, and it was essentially what the kind of photography that Pretty Focus teaches, like more of that like tutorial, because all of these brands were updating their websites to be SEO friendly.
Sure.
So it was,
Yep.
the step by step, and they didn't necessarily need a bunch of heroes. They just needed like mostly the steps. And so based on my portfolio, Southern Living was the brand that wanted to
Okay.
work with
So
me.
was that for their online space or for their
Yes.
magazines?
Yeah,
Okay.
online.
Okay.
And
Goodness. You have fans, Courtney.
I oh, I just realized I can look at the comments.
They
So
love
cute.
you.
But yeah, that's
Love you.
how the Southern Living thing happened.
Okay.
They would basically we had this like software we would go in and they would list a bunch of recipes for the month, and we could assign them to ourselves because it was me and a few other people.
Oh,
And
okay.
you could assign them to yourselves, and there was some very interesting recipes, some very interesting recipes that I didn't even eat. But
And you're cooking it all yourself, yeah?
yes, yeah, yeah, because you
Nice.
had to show the steps, and then they also wanted at least one finished product photo.
Okay.
Um, and it was a pretty easy gig because they would give you like a brief and tell you like these were the shots they wanted. Um, they would, oh, that was the other thing. We had a huge PDF of like their style guide. So
Oh,
it was
sure.
like the colors they preferred, the patterns they preferred, the lighting they preferred, um, all kinds of details that you had to like
Which I'm sure was
scan.
helpful, but also
It was helpful, but it was a little nerve wracking. Like
yeah.
try every time I would go to photograph, like, oh my God, I need to make sure I'm like picking the specific specific things that I know will work. Um, but it was fairly straightforward. And it was fairly regular for about a year. It was great. They paid just a flat amount each time. So some of the assignments were like 2 photos. Some of them were like
Okay.
10, but
Okay.
you got paid the same amount. So that was
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah.
They reimbursed for ingredients, like I think up to $50.
Oh, okay.
Um,
I mean, it sounds like a pretty sweet gig. So why would you pursue Pretty Focused? How did you hear about Pretty Focused
so
and why the
Southern
shift? Sounds great.
Southern living, like most people, or I should say, like most things I've noticed lately, just decided to slowly disappear. And they kept giving these weird excuses about like they were going over their budgets. And it wasn't just me that was involved, it was other photographers. And even though they didn't say it, I figured out that they had created they were creating a couple of actual like full-time positions at their home office to do what we were doing. And they didn't say that. So they just kept saying like, oh, it'll start in a month. Oh, it'll start in a couple of months. And then it never did. And it got to a point where I was like, okay, I can't count on this because it's never going to start again.
Yeah. Oh, that's so disappointing.
I mean, it wasn't surprising after a certain point. So that's when I threw a lot of energy into like pitching to brands, and I was pitching to like small local brands, and that is exhausting if anyone's ever done that.
I mean, tell us about that. What was it like to pitch to brands all the time? What was your success
really
rate?
Disheartening, because the percentage of like how many people you're pitching to even to who would give me a response was just insane. I did get a little bit of work that way. But unfortunately it kind of lined up when inflation started going kind of crazy. And a lot of small brands especially were like, we don't really have the money. So then I was trying to like really lower my prices to try and like work with people, which wasn't sustainable. And was honestly asking myself like, okay, what is the message from the universe that I just need to move on and not do this because I'm not making much of a living. Like I was fortunate to still have the work with the farms that I have every week, but I was doing a lot of like really deep soul searching, like, what do I need to do? What do I need to do next? And Pretty Focused happened to pop up as like an Instagram ad.
Excellent.
I had never heard of it before I signed up.
Good to know those work.
They do. I rarely ever click on Instagram ads. And so I was like, okay. Because at that point, I had spent a lot on courses already. And I was like, let me see if this one's any different. And the thing that intrigued me at first was the Buyers Club. Because of all the courses I have taken, none of them have actually bridged that gap between here's how to do this and here's a way for you to actually work with it. Like here's a way to get work.
Yep.
So I think I went through like the guide, or what is it in the roadmap? All the guides.
The roadmap, all the guides. Yeah. Yes. So much information. Yeah.
And like the little breakdown of like, this is what our grads make and like this is what course costs. And I ended up scheduling because it said you could schedule like a free Zoom.
Yeah.
And so I did, and it was with Lauren.
Oh, yes, isn't she the best?
And I was like, look, like I'm going to be really honest. This is my situation, and really just wanted to know about the Buyers Club and how that worked, and and ended up signing up.
So it was after that conversation with her that you were like, okay, I'm doing it.
Yeah, I pulled a tarot card. Because I was like, I'm not joking when I say I was sitting right here for probably like an hour, and my brain was like going through like pros and cons and
of joining Pretty Focused.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me know what were the pros and cons for you?
The only con was honestly the cost in terms of just my situation at that time.
Sure.
I knew it was going to basically put me in debt, but
Mm,
I feel like being in debt to some degree is pretty common for most Americans, especially in this economy.
mhm. Yeah.
Um, and that was kind of the only con I could see at the time. And I was like, all right, if, you know, I want to have an easier way to connect with potential clients, this seems like the best way to do that. And also the best way to continue doing food photography, which is
Yeah.
what I love because I've tried doing portraits. I don't, those of you that do that, that is
God,
amazing.
God, God
I
bless you.
I prefer food. Food doesn't look at me or talk to me.
You don't
It's
have
so
to
much
chase them
easier to
around.
style food than a person. Um,
Uh-huh.
yeah. So
Yep. 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 Okay, so let's talk about, so how long did it take you to go through the course then?
it was just a little over 3 months,
Okay.
about three and a half, I think.
Okay. And this was, and I want to point out that you were on the 3 month mark because, we have people who are experienced with coming into Pretty Focused, and they're like, if I'm experienced, like, where would I fit on that timeline? And I'm like, probably closer to the 3 month mark, maybe less. Do you think you could have gotten it done in less time, or do you think that
Not
it
really.
was good time? No. Okay. Okay.
Um, I went into it. I tried to go into it when I used to teach yoga. We called it like the beginner's mind. I tried to go into it not with the attitude of I'm going to know a lot of, camera basics and all of this. And instead, I am a rule follower. So I was like, I'm going to watch every lesson. I'm going to take my copious notes like I would do if
Yeah.
I were a beginner and like follow instructions to a T. And and so that's
I love
what
it.
I did. I think I think I answered someone's question they had asked the other day in the course group about like realistically how long did this take people? And honestly, I don't know that doing it in shorter than about 3 months would be possible, only because once you get to your practice sessions, you have to wait on feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And so in my mind, before I knew that, I was like, I'll like breeze through this in like a month or two. And then I was like, no, very quickly, I was like, no, your timeline has to shift
Yeah.
because it's so important, or at least for me, it was so helpful to get that feedback and then be able to apply it. Um,
So
because if
was
you're,
that, oh, go ahead.
oh no, I was just going to say, if you're not applying that feedback, then you're really not growing. You're just like staying in the in the same
Staying
line.
in the same place, and the
Mhm.
photo that you take in the beginning ends up being the same photo you took in the end, because you don't know what you don't know, and
Exactly.
the coaches are there to help you. So when you realized that you needed to wait on feedback before posting again, were you discouraged by that, or were you like, okay, this is the process and I just got to adjust expectations?
Yeah, I was basically like, okay, I just have to shift my timeline. And honestly, it was a little bit of a relief
Okay.
because the timeline I think I had originally put on myself was absolutely nuts. And yeah, it
Yeah.
was just like, all right,
Okay.
adapting. This is what we're doing. This is how long it's going to take.
Great.
And
Good.
yeah,
So So when you graduated, which was in November,
Yes.
how, like, not just a couple, like a month ago, tell us what it's been like since you graduated.
The beginning right after graduation was a very interesting transition because it was
Okay.
like all of my energy and my effort had been in like the course. And so it's sort of like if anyone has ever like you've graduated high school or graduated college, it's like, oh, now I have to actually like do the things.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
and so it was an interesting transition to be like,
Mhm.
oh, I now have to, you know, try and get the work. Like, it's not just going to be like handed to me, like, here you go.
Mhm.
And so it was kind of an interesting transition just for like switching my brain.
Okay.
And I think also just I'm the worst at, and this has always been my weakness in terms of like, you know, a freelancer or business owner, however you want to look at it. I am horrible at talking about myself and what I do. And so there was a little bit of certain things in my past coming up when I had to like post in the buyer's club for the first time. I was like,
Oh,
and then of course it was like, I don't want to post too much.
oh, sure.
And then
Yeah.
I think a couple of coaches were like, just like post as much as you want. I think I was worried like, oh, there's a limit. Like I shouldn't, I don't know.
Yeah, sure.
But
Right. I mean, I get it. I know what you mean. I know what you mean. You want to try to find, you don't want to be too much. If you don't, especially if you don't like talking about yourself, you really feel like you're putting your work out there on show, right? Is that
yes.
kind of part of it? Okay,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
okay, so you got over that. You're over that, right? We're over that little
I think
hurdle.
there probably will still be a little part of me that's always, and I think it's, I don't know what it is. I'm sure I could go to have a psychologist figure this out,
Yeah.
but there's probably always a little part of me that is, um, I'm super self-critical. And so I assume like everyone else is that critical of my
Oh,
work.
sure. Yeah.
So it's always just that little part of me that, you know, is like, they're all going to think it's rubbish. Like,
Yes, and clearly that's exactly what people think. Do you see this? Your photos are incredible, drool worthy.
oh, which macro lens? Oh, it's the Canon. It's the 100mm macro. The 2.8, I think that is my
Yeah,
macro lens.
love it. Yeah, so your work is incredible, and all of the coaches just have swooned over your work. They talk about how wonderful you are, and but Lindsay's totally right. Like we can all relate to that feeling of
Good.
being self-critical. So you're not alone in that feeling, but we're all gonna get through it together. um, so, but let's talk about, so once you kind of got through that, let's talk about um, like your clients. How long did it take you, once you posted for clients to connect with you? What has that process been like for you?
Um, in going in and graduating, my initial goal was to kind of ease in and start with just recreations.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had to flip flop that
Okay.
because I wasn't necessarily getting any bites on that. And
Okay.
so I
Okay.
was
You
like,
weren't getting the
okay.
response you wanted. Okay.
And the way I had done my portfolio, I think I had done like roughly half of the recipes as possible exclusives.
Okay.
And so I was like, okay, well, we're just going to switch. And I focused on that. And so it was like, okay, I'm going to turn my attention to like, you know, create a, like a, I keep wanting to call it Spotify in my brain, Shopify, not Spotify.
Two different things.
Yeah, two different things. So like created a shop really, not really quick, but I took like a Sunday and created the shop, got the recipes ready, got everything ready, created a watermark, created, all of these things that you kind of don't think of when you're in the course.
Yeah.
And got all of that ready. And then I think it took maybe, for the first recipe to sell, it was maybe like a couple days.
Okay.
And then, or no, maybe more like 3 or 4 days.
Okay.
And then I posted the next two at the same time. And those actually sold a little bit quicker. I think the same person bought them. So that was encouraging. And I was like, okay, like, let's move over this little hurdle, and started creating like a strategy for, how I was going to go about exclusives, and ended up signing up for the selling exclusives masterclass, which I was going to like wait and do next year.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, I've got to go ahead and do all of this. And yeah, but actually in the midst of that, I've had a couple of responses about things, and I'm working on some like a custom package of recipes for a blogger. So, and that's like very recent. That was like a few days ago. So
wow. So I mean, cause you're putting in some work, you gotta post, you gotta connect. I love that you shifted gears right away. And you're thinking, obviously you've owned your own business for a while. So you're thinking like you're not new to this. So you're really thinking like a business owner of pivoting to make sure that you are there. But what is it like compared to like cold pitching to like brands and stuff? Do you feel that it's the same, or do you feel like it's not even comparable? Like
no.
You still had clients that were there that you knew that you could interact with?
I feel like with the Buyers Club, cold pitching is like, I don't even know what to compare it to. There's no guarantee that anyone will ever respond.
Yeah.
Like there's really just not. You could either not get a response, or they'll respond and say like, not interested or whatever. But even so, I would get so far with certain people. I would do like a custom proposal for them, and do like a little mood board and like all of these things, and spend my time doing this. Obviously my time, they're not paying for it.
Right.
And I did that for several clients who just disappeared.
Oh no.
So I would say the difference with the Buyers Club is, while there will still be people who you might interact with who ultimately aren't interested, in general, the people in the Buyers Club are interested in what you're doing.
That's why they're there. Yeah.
Right. It's not like just randomly trying to email small businesses and people and try and get the work. Like you're all there for essentially the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's been much less of a headache in terms of that. Like I don't have to seek out. With cold pitching, I would have to every week come up with a list of people to pitch to. I don't
tailor your pitch to them.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
In the Buyers Club, I don't have to seek out individual people. Anyone who's in there is, can post about, whatever it's about, and not have to like worry about, okay, this week I'm sending it to these 10 businesses, and the next week I'm sending it to these 10, it removes a lot of the headache for me that was cold pitching.
Yeah.
So.
Oh gosh. Well, I'm so glad that that it has alleviated some of that. I'm really excited to hear about this package of recipes you're doing for a client. How many recipes? What is that? What does this entail?
Um, it happened to be she had posted something in the Buyers Club about wanting low calorie mocktails. And I don't develop anything with calories in mind, but I don't really drink much alcohol anymore because I'm old and it makes me tired. And so just personally, like in my own life,
Mhm.
I, for the past couple of years, have had an interest in like creating mocktails for myself. And I did, one of them was in my portfolio that I did end up selling. And so I just responded to her and I was like, I think she was trying to see if anyone had any available right like now.
Okay.
And I said, I don't have any available, but I'd love to develop some for you. I was like, just let me know. And she did reach out fairly quickly. And she was super responsive on emails, which was really refreshing.
Sure.
you
Yes,
know,
right? Is of
you
all the
know,
times you've been ghosted?
yeah. So I ended up, uh, she wanted like a mocktail for each season. I'm assuming to like use over the course of the next year on her blog. So I am developing those recipes
Are you doing like
right
4 of
now.
them?
Yeah.
Nice.
And she kind of gave me some guidelines. I kind of gave her suggestions and kind of nailed out
That's
the rough
awesome.
idea. And
Nice. And I bet that was so much nicer than a nice PDF brand guide, right? Like, did she give you like a little bit more creative control? Like she, gave
I
you what she
asked,
wanted?
I did ask, I sent her, like a little questionnaire
Perfect.
and then I sent her the mocktail I had done in my portfolio because she was like, do you have any examples? And she was like, oh, that's great. I was like, oh, okay. So it's,
Perfect. I love
yeah.
that. I love that. So is Pretty Focused what you thought it would be? Like, do you regret any regrets?
No, I don't. It's actually not what I thought it would be. And I do not have any regrets. Um, I was expecting it to be more like other courses I've taken. I didn't realize the level of involvement from like the coaches. Um, and to me, the course is worth it just for that aspect. Like if you were to take out all the lessons and all of that, I have never taken a course where there has been that much guidance aside from the actual course itself. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I was not expecting that. And that was at first almost mind boggling to me. I was like, how are these people having this much time to devote to like giving feedback and answering questions? And it really was just so invaluable. Like for anyone wanting to know about the course, I would say, course lessons aside, which are obviously very helpful and great, course lessons aside, just the feedback process, at least to me, was where I learned the most and
Good.
were incredibly helpful. In addition to just being in a community in the Facebook group with other people in the course,
Yeah.
where you could ask a question and, you weren't going to be like judged for not knowing something or,
Yeah.
there, it definitely, it blew my mind how like supportive um, everyone for the most part is in that
Yeah.
group with
Yeah.
offering suggestions, answering questions, even giving encouragement because like, when you're learning something new, sometimes you get into a little bit of a dark place if you know,
Sure. It can be challenging,
yeah,
right?
if you're meeting a challenge, yeah. So
Yep. Well, so you came in obviously being very skilled in food photography. What what were some new things that you learned?
So my experience with food photography was very much editorial based,
Okay.
and very much into the storytelling aspect of a photo. Not that Pretty Focus doesn't teach you that, but
Right.
the main difference I would say for anyone curious is with editorial based food photography, it's not always so hyper focused on the recipe itself. Um, Say, for instance, like, you open up Southern Living and they've got like this like elaborate table scene. Well, a blogger can't necessarily use that.
Mm-hmm.
But that was kind of my
Mm-hmm.
training. So it was like, negative space was like a positive thing because that would help tell your story. And, like all these things and like using like with composition going way beyond what you teach in like the course. And so it was kind of a relief to be like, oh, I'm just focusing on the recipe itself. Like
Yeah.
that is filling up most of the frame.
Yes. It is a relief, right? I
Yeah.
mean, that's why I'm like, get the 100 because it saves you so much time because you're just
Yeah.
like, I'm looking at are these blueberry scones that you did that you got the glaze
Oh,
over
this,
across the
yes.
top?
Mhm.
And like the biscuits, it's like it takes so much of the guesswork out because like the biscuits frame or fill the whole frame of the photo. And I am fumbling over my screen because I'm going to share it real quick if that's okay. So you can see here what we mean, by that. It's her biscuits are like centered right there in the photo. And composition wise, whenever you center something, it's like bam in your face. These different compositional techniques. The S, it just helps you flow. The S curve helps you flow through. All these other things centered is like wham bam in your face. And that's because when people are scrolling on social media, they need something in their face that is going to make them
Yes.
stop. Like, because you are like mindlessly scrolling. Everybody does this. You're mindlessly scrolling on Instagram or Facebook late at night. You have to have something so in their face and so delicious looking that it's going to stop that mindless scrolling and then draw their attention in. And so those are things that we teach within Pretty Focus. But I just love, looking at all of this. But you can see here that her food, and that's what she's talking about, that it brought some relief to her because, she didn't have to focus on the whole scene. She could focus on just the food itself. I love that. Oh God, this looks so good. And look how tall. I mean, look at those biscuits. They're so tall and perfect. Like, they're so good. So I just wanted to show you guys, give you guys some examples of what she talks about, the difference with, that editorial where you're focused on the whole scene, but what we teach is just really on the food. And I
Yeah.
love that you felt relief. Like, okay,
Yeah. I mean,
a little bit easier.
to me, I know that there's other compositional techniques that
Absolutely.
are addressed in the course, but
Mhm.
if I can offer anything to someone beginning, like simplify it and just focus on a triangle. I think, when you're filling up most of the frame with the hero, you don't have to worry about, because, like I said, that's what it is in editorial style. Like you're bringing in other props and you've got like these vintage things and this vintage spoon and this, which there's nothing wrong with using those, but it takes kind of the guesswork out and you're just narrowing the focus down so much more. Just focus on the food.
Yeah.
My brother told me something one time. He's an illustrator, and he was like, you have to assume that people who are consuming your content, this is going to sound horrible, are kind of dumb. And you can't expect them to figure out what you're trying to say. Like you have to be like, here you go. And so that's kind of what the food centered approach is. Like there's no question that that recipe is for a biscuit.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a biscuit, right?
But he is so right, because we've had, feedback from bloggers, and they're like, please, no styling on process. Like, I know you're trying to show the next step in the recipe. She goes, but readers get so confused. And so just keep it simple. Right. And so, because that's what you're doing. So I love that he said that, whenever you communicate, verbally, you always want to make sure that you're, communicating well, right? And you're explaining things in a way that people can understand. And that's how it translates, like, to photography. It's like just keeping it simple, so people can, they know exactly what it is that they're making, right? They know the texture of the scone. They know how high the biscuits are supposed to be. If their biscuits didn't turn out that way, like, they did something wrong, right? And so, yeah, I agree with him. He's not wrong. Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree. So we had, we've even heard, like, bloggers will put, like, pour the brownies in a 13x9 pan. And the readers are like, I don't have a 13x9, but I have a 9x13. Will that still work? And you're like, you can't make this stuff up. And so it's a true story. And so even that's why we talk about, like, starting with simple pans, because heaven forbid, if you make a casserole in a cast iron skillet, they are going to wonder, they're going to think that they can't make it because they don't have a cast iron skillet.
Yeah.
And so you want to be creative and you want to do things fun, and of course you don't want to take that creativity out of it, but those are things that that's not taking creativity out of it. That's just, like, doing things that make sense for the recipe and for the reader. So, yeah, people are crazy. And we're those people. That's the thing. I say that knowing I'm the crazy one too.
We're all guilty of,
I own it. I own it.
paying
We all
attention
have
sometimes, and
yeah, we all have our own little bit of crazy going on. So it is it. So how many recipes have you sold then, like, total then?
as exclusives,
Mm-hmm.
6,
Okay.
I think.
Are you happy with that number? Are you good? Would you like to sell? I mean, obviously you want to sell more. How many more do you have?
That's honestly, I've only posted 8 for sale so far. So, I've been trying to kind of figure out how it fits, with, like, my schedule with photographing for the farm. So, like, every other week I have slightly more time. So that's kind of the weeks that I can photograph. And then the other weeks are kind of, I can allow time for recipe development and testing.
Okay.
So I'm happy with that number. I know it doesn't seem like a lot.
But I mean, that's what, like, I want to know, and I know that people will want to know, when you get to the end, is it everything you thought it was going to be? And are you going to be able, I mean, what are you thinking for the future? Like, when you think ahead, are you hopeful for the future? Do you feel like, do you have relief now that you don't have to worry about cold pitching? You feel like you have a little bit more stable work coming in the future? Tell me what you're thinking about that.
I definitely, having secured that client I was talking about, that wanted, like, the 4 mocktails, definitely helped, because before then, like I said, I was not planning on doing exclusives right after graduating, even though I've developed recipes for a very long time. That was not something I was planning on doing right in the beginning. And so there was a little bit of slight discouragement when I graduated, just because I was like, oh crap, like, I have to, like, flip flop and do this. Because it's one thing to develop a recipe for my own blog. It's another to develop it for someone else.
Uh-huh. When somebody else's reputation is on the line, right?
Yes. And so I think once I kind of figured that out and figured out what that was going to look like, that kind of started melting away a little bit. And then, of course, when you do actually sell recipes, it is kind of exciting at first because you're like, okay, like clearly I'm doing something right.
Yeah.
And so my goal is to I want to kind of gradually ease into transitioning this to full time. And I would say my goal was to be hopefully doing this more full time from the time I graduated in like 6 months.
Okay.
Just because the work I do for the farms right now is the majority of my time. And as much as I love doing that for them, I actually don't want to live here in Houston anymore.
What? Why would you want to leave Texas?
I don't know if anyone else is in here and that's watching this that lives near here, but our weather is horrible. It's horrible. That's why my fan is always on. It does not go off most of the year.
So, where do you want to move? Where would you go?
I have always wanted to be on the East Coast. My brother and one of my sisters actually just moved to Baltimore. I do not want to live in Baltimore.
Would you live in?
I have visited twice. There's nothing wrong with it, but I was like, this isn't really my vibe.
Would you live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania?
Well, my brother was in Philly for about a year.
Lenore is in Pennsylvania.
Oh, I was like, that's an oddly
coming to the East
specific
Coast
location.
Yeah, Lenore she's in Pennsylvania. So, yeah, so that's so funny. But on the East Coast, that's your plan, is to leave Texas and then to be able to do this full time.
Yeah, because obviously this, I can do anywhere.
Yeah, it's so. I know, it's amazing.
Yeah,
it is amazing. We have somebody else in Houston. It's Facebook user. I'm not sure who this is. Tell us your name. Tell us who you are. But
maybe their parent named them Facebook user. I don't know.
Maybe so. all these new names, I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, we'll have to do. I wonder. I feel like we have quite a few. Oh, it's Priscilla. I feel like we have quite a few students. Well, I know we do in like the Dallas area too. So I know that's a little bit further.
I went to school in Dallas.
Oh, nice. So we have some questions that some people have asked, and just some wonderful comments that you're adding to that positive community by taking the time to come back to us, still going through the course and giving us encouragement. And so that is one thing that our coaches have pointed out about you, is that you always show up and are giving our students encouragement, like the other students encouragement, and just your own feedback, giving it to them. And so that has been so valuable. And so every time you post, the coaches see that and they absolutely love you for it. Like, they just think it's the best thing. And so thank you for doing that, because that's why our community is amazing. Like, that's why people come in and they're like, wow, this is really a nice place, especially if you've come from another food photography or photography course. You don't get that in other groups.
It's funny because I am incredibly introverted. And so in the beginning, I think when I first started the course, I was not doing that. But then I think once I saw like truly how encouraging, all the students and coaches are. I mean, obviously I've been a beginner at some point. Like, I understand what it is to be starting something new and to be like a little afraid to share. And yeah, I mean, you need people to lift you up. Like I think
Absolutely.
it's so ridiculous. Like I can't even get on Instagram anymore sometimes. You know, just
I know.
like it's like if you don't have
There's
anything nice to say, don't say it at all.
there's just so much crap out there. There's
Yeah.
just so much out negative out there.
Mhm.
And it's like, let's keep it out. Like this place is not going to happen here. Like you got it going on and all these other places. Like let this be a place where you can come and hang out virtually, or just know that it's going to be a great place for you to learn, a safe place for you to learn, a fun place, hopefully a fun place for you to learn. Because like you said, I mean, we have experience, but we also have beginners in there, and it is overwhelming,
Mhm.
you know. And so if you can do something with a community, the chances are you're going to be more successful. And so
Yeah.
we definitely community is so important.
Like, can you imagine like, well, I taught myself Lightroom. That's how I had to learn Lightroom.
Sure. Yeah.
So like when someone asks a question about it, I'm like, here is this, here you go. Because, you know, there's no point in struggling. Like, you know,
Yeah,
like,
I know. I know. I remember whenever I was first new, it was like I would go to these to all the blogs, you know, and they were written in a way that I did not work with my brain. And it was very overwhelming. And I remember that I had, you know, some friends who were, you know, starting out in photography, and I'd be like, how do you know like what your camera settings should be? You know, how do you know? And
mhm.
because I was trying to figure that out, and they were like, oh, well, it varies. I'm like,
Great.
do you not know yourself, or do you not
Yeah.
want to give me information? Like it was so hard. It was so hard for me to figure out, like, are you afraid to share with me? But that's how it felt. And then I had this other young man, and so like whatever camera he had, I bought. You know, he was like, this is the camera I have. And I was like, great, that's the camera I'm gonna buy then, you know, knowing nothing. It was just like going off of his
Yeah.
recommendation. And then he was so kind to share with me and to help me grow, you know. And it was like he knew that, you know, what did he have, like he was just so helpful. And so I had those two comparisons, you know, those two people side by side, and it was like, which one do I want to be?
Yeah.
And of course I wasn't going to be the one that was like, no, I'm not going to tell you. I wanted to be the one that shared information.
Yeah. That's, I think, what was really refreshing about this course and this community, because until then, I've had some great teachers, but I've also witnessed a lot of like weird gatekeeping around information,
Mm-hmm.
or like, here's the secret to this, but you have to pay me this much money. It's like, well, like, I don't want to pay you to tell me how to like use Lightroom. Like, I can
Yeah.
figure it out myself, you know?
Right.
But
Right.
it just kind of weird. I mean, gatekeeping is the best way I can describe it.
Mhm.
And I've run into that situation in other food photography communities, where I've asked a question and gotten very vague answers. And I'm like, and
Mhm.
it's like, you know, clearly there's enough work for all of us. And it just seems really bizarre.
Yeah.
So, like you're saying, you know, I try and remind myself of that. I'm like, you know, sure, I'm going to help this person and give them advice or answer their question,
Yeah.
because I would have wanted that in that situation.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you for that. Thank you for sharing everything. Or just being so kind. It just goes so far. So Redonda asked, like, was the pay this was when you were talking about Southern living. Like, is it comparable to what you are doing for food bloggers?
They paid a little more.
Okay.
They paid, and this was, I haven't had any of that work this year, so this would have been most of last year. They just paid like a straight 300 per assignment.
Okay.
So one of the assignments was literally taking a photo of a can of Baker's Joy.
Okay. And so you got that paid no matter what.
And then, you know, something else would be a recipe where they wanted like 8 or 10 shots. Or it would be like a lot of what they would do, it wouldn't be like recipes. It would be like how to freeze asparagus.
Oh, sure. Those how-tos.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like how-tos, or like, you know, how to clean strawberries.
Okay.
So those were incredibly easy because there was no cooking.
Mhm.
So it was nice because it was just like a straight, you know, amount of money. And they would reimburse for ingredients, like I said, up to $50.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
so it was never having to worry about that. And when it was around, it was consistent, but obviously it's not around anymore.
Yeah, it's not around anymore. Yeah.
And I had no
Um,
control over what I was shooting, by the way. Like,
oh yeah.
you
Yeah,
know,
and now you do. I'm looking at your shortbread cookies right now. I assume lemon. Oh, yeah, lemon shortbread cookies. And so, I mean, you have, um, I mean, we have grads making, 300 on up for recipes, maybe that 275, 300. I don't know if there's anybody charging less than 300 for an exclusives. There might be a couple of
I've
them, but
seen less than
have you
that
seen?
in the group, and I'm like,
Okay.
I just
Yeah.
want to be like, you're talented. Raise your prices.
Yes, thank you for that. So let's talk about the Buyers Club. Karen's asked, how do bloggers get access to the Buyers Club? And so right now, we have been able to grow to the point where we, from word of mouth, like other people, we just had somebody post about Pretty Focused in a group, and we had a huge influx of bloggers come in. And so in the future, we are looking at, advertising to continue to grow that blogger. So our ratio stays the same. I think that somebody asked that maybe on Tuesday. And so Karen also wants to know how long, this is going back to the client who asked for those drinks. How long do you have to get to create those? Like, what's your timeline?
She asked for turnaround time, and I did not want to frighten her away. So I told her I could do it in 2 weeks because
Okay.
the testing for a mocktail is much quicker than, you know, a baked good.
Yeah.
There's no cooking involved. I'm literally takes me 2 minutes to make it, taste it, and then I can move on. So I did tell her 2 weeks that, you know,
Okay.
I would have everything to her. Also because I didn't really want to be working on it during Christmas.
Absolutely. So when are you going to get them done?
I think it was 2 weeks from the contract being signed, which will put it like, I think it's like the day after Christmas, but
Oh, okay.
my goal is to have all of the photos done by the end of next week, like
Okay.
the work week, so like Friday.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Good. What advice do you have for people who are working on their portfolio?
I would say, because I got this advice a lot in portfolio, and we kind of mentioned this earlier, talking about like food centric photography. If you have a macro lens, or if you can get a macro lens, really focusing on those very close shots to actually show texture of the food, drip shots, pour shots, anything that'll show, you know, all of those beautiful textures of the food, like those are really important.
Yeah.
And I think I didn't quite realize that at first. It's kind of hard to like train your brain, like for me moving from editorial to this, because, you know, I am pulled so much closer than I was with that. So
Yeah.
don't be afraid to get close to the food. I used to think too, like my brain was like, the food has to be like, you have to see the whole plate that the food is on. No, like you crop off some of the plate, that's fine. You don't have to see the whole plate.
Yeah. I am a plate cropper.
Yeah.
I crop the plate on almost all my shots. I do like the 3/4 of the plate, you know, and so, yeah, I love it. I love it. That's really great advice. Those close-up heroes with a macro, and somebody said like she's debating between the 100 or the 85 macro. The 85 is the mirrorless macro. And I know I have a friend who shoots on it. I haven't shot on it. Amy, I know, has shot on it. Have you? Do you
I have
mirrorless?
not, but I know someone that has one, and she uses it more for like portrait.
Okay. The macro, the 85 macro, she does?
I think so. Maybe it's just an 85 and not a macro.
Okay.
I don't remember, but
okay.
I do follow a food photographer who does frequently use an 85. I don't know that it is a macro.
Okay.
But this lens was a game changer. I didn't buy this lens until I started the course.
Wow.
I had a 50 millimeter 1.4 and a 35 millimeter 2.0. I hate my 50 millimeter and actually ended up selling it because I never used it.
Because you didn't like the focal length, or you didn't like that lens? Because the Canon's 51.4 is not a good lens. It's not good.
I didn't ever like the way the photos looked. To me, they never looked as good as they did with my 35 millimeter. So that is what I use for my process shots. And then all of my heroes are now the 100.
Okay, yeah. I mean, it is. I remember upgrading my camera gear and thinking, oh my gosh. It was whenever I got my 51.2, because I had the Mark III and I had a 51.4, and it was terrible. And I got the 51.2 and I was like, I'm a lot better than I thought I was. You know what I mean? You get to the point where your gear holds you back. And I was like, I actually feel confident now charging my prices. Like my work matches like the value that I'm providing, right? Like it matched my price point, and I just felt so much more confident. And
I actually upgraded my camera body halfway through my portfolio.
Okay.
And realized how much harder I had to, how much more involved my editing was for my older camera.
What did you start out with, and what'd you get?
My very first camera was a Rebel T3i. That tells you how long ago that was. Because what's the current one? T9? I don't even know.
T8, and they may have come out with a 9.
Okay.
I don't know though.
That was my very first DSLR. And then about 5 years ago, I got an 80D, the Canon 80D. I hate saying it. Sounds like I'm saying 80D. And that is what I used until the third or fourth recipe in my portfolio.
Okay.
And I now have the R5.
Oh, okay.
So it was not only getting an insane jump in megapixels, but it's now a full frame. Getting used to the fact that it was a full frame, I was like, where's all this extra space coming from my image? Like, what the heck?
Oh my
So yeah,
That is coming soon. That's going to be my next. I'm getting my Mark III and my Mark IV cleaned right now so I can sell them. And I love my R6, but I wanted a second mirrorless camera, like just to do two mirrorlesses instead of like a mirrorless and a DSLR. Because you look through a DSLR, I'm like, what's happening? What's happening? Where's the photo? I can't like I was like, how did I use this for so long?
yeah. The shutter is so much different. Like it doesn't shake my whole camera when it goes on,
I know
which was how my other camera was. It
seriously.
was like,
Yeah, I love it. So that is so cool. I love it. So that you have quite the setup there, and gear absolutely does make a difference with the camera or with the quality of the images. And so I think that, when people ask, well, can I start with a T3? I still get that question, or can I start with a T6? And I'm like, you can start with it, but you're probably going to have some limitations, and it's going to cause some frustration. And you'll probably want to upgrade sooner than later. Like I think you can work with it, but I think that overall they would want to upgrade.
Like if anyone wants to go look at my portfolio, see if you can figure out what's R5 and what's ADD.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can absolutely take beautiful photos with a crop sensor, with a crop sensor with an ADD, and I've done the same with, and I do that. I show that actually in the roadmap. Like the lesson's called "Is My Gear Good Enough?" and I show photos side by side, and you can absolutely do it. Lighting is going to be key. You are probably going to want to invest in at least artificial light.
Yeah.
Unless you live in Arizona and have amazing natural light.
We have great natural light here, but it's also incredibly hot most of the year. So our house has these like screens on each window that eliminate a lot of light that makes its way in.
Yep. There's a lot of houses in Arizona that has that too. My friend's house had that. I'm like, it's why so dark?
Yeah. So it's like a cave in my house all the time, which is, I will say I did not start working with artificial light until the beginning of this year.
Okay.
So I just dealt with it. And because of that, because of how dark it is in my house, I could only really shoot in front of, like, for all the stuff I did for Southern Living, it was like in front of one window in my house. I had to take the screen off and could only shoot in a very specific time window, and was able to make it work, but it was so many constraints. Yeah.
Yeah, I know that. Okay. So I'm looking up this lens, the 24 to 75, and I don't see that. Are you referring to the 24 to 70?
Yeah, I think that's what they mean.
Okay. And if so, yes, I have that lens as well. And so it can work. It is not going to do the same thing as the 100, like you saw with her biscuits. It's not going to do that. You're going to need a longer focal length and a macro in order to do that. The thing that you would want to watch out with this lens, and I know because I get myself in this pickle all the time and I don't even realize it, is I'll end up shooting at 24, and it is very easy to make your pans look warped. If you were the slightest bit off, when you look at the photo, you feel like you're going to fall off the table. And so I've made that mistake using that lens. And so that's just something to be aware of. Even if you're using like the 18 to 55 millimeter, I wouldn't recommend when you're working with a wide angle lens like that to take it to the widest angle in such close quarters. You know, that's usually when you're doing like a full wide room shot, but otherwise you start getting some crazy warp stuff going on. Like when you go to 0.5 on your iPhone, you know, you go to 0.5 and then you take a picture of somebody and their legs look twice as long as they're supposed to, or their feet look like they're size 16. So those are, it's a true story. So, and then we'll answer this one last question. Is there a big picture quality difference between DSLR or mirrorless? I'll let you answer first and then I'll share my thoughts.
Well, so my DSLR is a crop sensor. The one I was using it right before the mirrorless. So I think the main difference for me was that jump from crop sensor to full frame. It was also the jump in the amount of megapixels. The R5 is insane.
It's got 45.
Yeah. Mine was like the 80D, I think, is 20 something. So it was double. So the crazy thing with that is you could zoom in so much with photos taken on the R5. So with my crop sensor, I was always very worried about cropping because I had to make sure I maintain the like integrity and the clarity.
Yeah.
So I would say it was a big difference mostly because of crop sensor and full frame. However, I could look like if I look at the raw images from my mirrorless versus my DSLR, there's definitely a difference. I would say I mostly notice how it takes the picture is very different. So it's mirrorless, so you don't have that like sound when you're taking the picture of like the mirror flipping up. So
Yeah.
like,
thank you for that demonstration. It's true.
so you know, it's so fast in terms of like the high speed continuous or whatever it's called shooting. Like the mirrorless that I have, there's actually two high speed ones or two continuous ones, and it is insane like the amount of shots it will take in like even just 1 second.
Seriously, yeah.
And so just in terms of difference, I've noticed it's a really big difference with just the mechanics of how the camera works and allowing me to do things that I really couldn't do on my DSLR. And just the fact that it has an insane amount of megapixels.
Yeah.
It's a really big difference.
Yeah. So, and we talk about this in module 1. We actually go into how like the differences between DSLR and mirrorless. And I thought that I had posted this in the roadmap, but I guess I was wrong. But of the inner workings of the camera. And so it's quieter, it's faster. And so you will have like a lot going from the Mark IV to the R6 was a little bit of a downgrade in megapixels. But the thing to also remember with megapixels is for us, exactly what Courtney said is where those matter for us is cropping or blowing up. And so, but also the size of the megapixels matter for how much light is being let in. So Karen, what we would be able to give a better, because I think DSLR cameras are still great. The Mark IV takes phenomenal photos. I think we would need to see the cameras that you're comparing side by side to really know, because the R5 is definitely better than the 80D, right?
I didn't think to say this. Redonda said it in the comments. Yeah, the R5 has unlimited focal points, but
thank you, Redonda. Thank you. I was like, I know the amount of focal points on
Yeah.
mirrorless,
Yeah.
they are I mean, same with the R6, they're unlimited. And with the DSLR, you're a little bit more limited in that. So you kind of really have like this full control. You have so much more control, I
Yeah.
feel like.
I actually had
So
gotten into the habit on my DSLR. I would only use the like the live view to focus
mhm.
because I was so limited when I was looking through the viewfinder.
Yeah.
So that was like my
Yeah.
workaround was like, I'll just like only
Yeah.
look at the back.
I am looking up, somebody asked this question for the Sony. They're asking for a Sony. Sorry, you can hear me typing, I'm sure. So it depends on where you want to go with your budget. I don't know if the 7RI is mirrorless or if that's a DSLR. The Alpha 7, well, I'm not a Sony expert. So I'm like, I don't want to start dropping stuff, dropping information off. But the things that I would be looking for in a new Sony are, making sure like the focal points, you do want to take a look at the megapixels. I would say usually that you're going to want to look. I think the prices are all comparable in that $2,000 to $3,000 range for a really great camera. I mean, you can go more than that and you can definitely do less than that, but I feel like that $2,500 range is probably where you're going to be looking at for a great camera, for like a really good pro level camera that gives you full control over the settings, gives you full control over the focal points that we talked about. So yeah, I don't have specific advice. I can find out for you. But I'm a Canon shooter, so it is a mirrorless. Okay. Alrighty. So, okay, you guys, we've been chatting. You guys have been rocking out with us for over an hour now. Courtney, thank you so much for joining us and helping answer these questions. Is great. It's awesome. It was so great to talk to you, to hear your story from archaeology to food photographer for food bloggers. And we're so excited about you and your business and the future of your business, and cannot wait to see what unfolds for you in the next 6 months. We are cheering you on that you are going to be leaving Texas soon, heading east. That's what we hope for you. But you guys, thank you so much for joining. And I want to let you know again, we're open for enrollment. This is the last month to be able to get Pretty Focus at the current price. And we are opening up until December 31st. So usually it's just a week, but we're going to be open up all month long to give everybody the opportunity to join. And so we thank you guys for being here. Courtney, thank you so much. And you guys, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. We'll see you later.